In The Death of Ivan Ilyich, Tolstoy's wonderful short story, Ivan Ilyich was an accountant in Moscow who was on his deathbed knowing that he was going to die. And the story is the story of what is going on inside of him as he passes his life in review. And the sentence that hit me like a thunderbolt as I read that was, what if my whole life has been wrong? What if I did it all wrong? I mean, what if all of the order and all of the things and all of the rules and all of the right things that Ivan did, because he was very organized and thorough about his life, what if all of those things turn out not to be the right thing? And Tolstoy is saying, even when you've only got a few hours left, you can still change that and appreciate what you have right here and right now. And that's the whole message of that. It does seem a bit late to me, and not something you have to work on, but I wonder how many people in this audience tonight have had a close brush with death, or have had somebody close to them have that, or maybe been in an accident where you have been there on that bed wondering whether you're going to survive. And most people who have that kind of an experience in their lives at one time or another almost always say, it taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. That is, that I've got to take each day that I live and make it complete, whole, filling, creative, exciting for me. The problem is that it shouldn't have to take a brush with death to do something so natural, so simple, so basic. And that is to live your life the way you want to, on your terms, without having to answer to anyone else. Well, the whole idea of that circle and trying to get out of that circle and get between point B and C means taking each day of your life as if it were the last, not as if it were the first. See, a lot of people say, you hear the slogan on the bumper stickers, this is the first day of the rest of your life. I like the idea of thinking, this is the last day of my life, and I am going to live it as if I didn't have any more. Because the truth is that you don't. You don't know. The past is over for all of us. The future is promised to none of us. All we get is this one. It's all we get. And each one of us knows someone close to us, our own age, who was wiped out in a silly accident, who was dropped dead of a heart attack, who, whatever it may be. And everyone here, if you don't know this, you haven't really been alive, that you're going to have to face the last day. We all do. Death is as important a part of life as living it. And understanding that and leading your life on those terms can be the most freeing, exhilarating, exciting thing that you can have. And what I would like to see my profession do more of, and that is help people to go between being normal and looking at your potential for happiness, fulfillment in yourself.
If you're the kind of person who has your mind filled with 10 different things that you have to do, and that is producing anxiety, stress, ulcers, colds, backaches, headaches, cramps, runny noses, all of the kinds of physical reactions and manifestations of that kind of thinking, then you have to look at how can you just get a blank mind, or how can you get a quiet mind? How can you just understand that, supposing you're thinking about, you got to get to work, you've got this report you got to get out, you got to get your taxes done, you got to stop and get some diapers on the way home, the kids need to have bananas, and they've got dance lessons I've got to get them to, and an endless catalog of activities. By using your mind to do that and to occupy it all the time, none of that is going to get done. See, all of that is going to get done. Regardless, if you're the kind of person who does those things, it's going to get done. The question is, how do you use your present moments? See, anytime you use up your present moment, or any time that you are thinking anxious thoughts, you're denying the present. You're using up the present moment. Instead of using it up in a productive, peaceful, serene, calm way, you are somehow believing that you can't get through this day or this moment any other way, that if I don't think about it and worry about it and be anxious about it. But the fact is, it's going to get done. Your taxes are going to get done. You're not going to jail. You're not the kind of person who's going to opt to just simply not do your taxes. You're going to get the diapers. You're going to get the report done. All of that you're going to get done. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in. You would be doing something else, all right? So if you know that it's going to get done, the question is, what's the most efficient and effective and peaceful way to get things done? I use the analogy often of when you're in a hurry, like when your body is in a hurry. That's when you're least effective at things. That's when you always drop something. You'll drop the keys, and then you'll start sweating. And then when you start sweating, you find yourself getting more upset, and you'll forget something. And you'll walk out the door, and you'll slam the door, and you left the key on the inside. Now you don't have a key. I've talked about when you take a shower. If you rush through a shower because you only have 5 minutes to take a shower, and you finish and you take your shower and then you dry yourself off, you didn't need to take a shower because you're already dirty again. I mean, you're already sweating and all. You can take the same 5 minutes and take a shower if that's all you have, and you can do it peacefully. The same 5 minutes. You can push all of the other stuff out and you can just relax. And if you've got 3 minutes, instead of rushing through it, you can just let the water pour. You can experience the water, you can wash your body, you can do whatever, you can dry it all off. And when you finish, you're not sweating. And you had the same amount of time. The nervousness and all of that comes from the way that you decide to process. Now, in the physical world, you understand that if you hurry and rush and are filled with 1,000 different activities, that you have decreased your efficiency. Why isn't the same thing true in the mental world? In your mind. If you are filling your mind with all of the things that you have to do, and you're worried about all of those things and get yourself all consumed with them, then you're still going to be less efficient, less effective, and you're still going to be cluttered. At a moment like that, you put on a tape. If you're going to drive, you got to drive. You can't get the bananas and the diapers and the report done and the IRS taken care of in the car on the freeway. You can't do that then. You're driving. So why not be here now, as Ram Dass says. Be here now. Here's some music. Put on a tape. Meditate right there. Don't close your eyes. But just like push it all out. Okay, all of that's going to get out. But meantime, I'm going to enjoy this.
Do you remember when you were in grade school? Remember before you went to school, all you could think about was getting to school. Just like, that's it. Or even when you're in your playpen, you're almost trained to think, well, when I get out of the playpen, I get the whole room. Boy, just get me out of this playpen. Then you get out of the playpen, you get the room, and you think, Jesus, I'd like to go into the next room. But they got one of those things across the hall there. So I got to get past that gate that they put there. But boy, when I can get into both rooms, and then maybe I can get into the cupboards and get the pans out, that'll be when I arrive. And then it's like, maybe I can go down into the yard. So the yard becomes the goal. And you get out of the yard, and it's the block. And then you get out of the block, and it's like going around the block. Woo, first time around the block. But, there's a street to cross. It's like, it's always next. You finally get into school. You're in elementary school. And all you can think about is getting out. So because elementary school, what I remember about elementary school is lines. I hated lines and permission. 5 years you pee whenever you feel like it. All of a sudden, now you gotta ask permission. I don't want to ask permission to pee anymore. So it's like, let me out of here. And in lines, you're going to geography now and you stand in line. I mean, who the hell in the world goes to anything like this? And the lines don't move. You just stand there waiting. I guess if it moved, it would be a parade, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be a line. Anyway, all you can think about is junior high. So you get to junior high and you get out of line. So you get to junior high and you find out that this ain't nothing. This is not the place to be. Junior high, because they don't treat us like adults at all. We have to take whatever courses they give us, and we have always being told to stop touching each other. Well, we like to touch each other in junior high. And sit up. Quiet. No talking. Boy, my teacher knew that word real well. No talking. I said, no talking, no talking. Everybody talked whenever she said that. But anyway, it was like, so I get out of junior high, that'll be it. When I get to high school, oh, high school is going to be, that's it. Your life is now complete. You get to go to high school. Ooh, finally. You get into high school and you realize you're just a little freshman. Nothing. Freshman. Even the word sounds yucky. Freshman? So you just bypass that. You say, well, all right, I'll put up with this because next year I'll be a senior underclassman. Euphemism for a sophomore. So you get, when I get in the 10th grade, then I can date. And then it's like nothing in the world counts except being an upperclassman. Except getting a driver's license. Because that's what life is all about when you're 14 and 15, is getting a driver's license. I mean, that's all there is. I told my daughter, I said, maybe next summer we'll go to Finland, then we'll go from there, we'll go to Greece and go on the Greek islands, and then spend a nice time there, we'll learn all about those other cultures. She said, that'd be great, Dad, but my birthday's August 1st, and I get my driver's license, and I know that roads means a lot to you, but, I want to drive. She wants to leave Greece to come home and get her driver's license, because that's all there is, so she can drive around and go nowhere. But it gives you the freedom, you see, so she's thinking about that until you start thinking about dating. Wow, when I can date, boy, that's when my life will get complete. Or finally, it's like when I get out of this high school, Jesus, it'll be so great that I won't have to be told what to do. And finally, you work for that, and you work for it, and you get out of high school, and there's no bands. There's a little ceremony, and all of a sudden, there's no scholarship to life out there at all. You got to face it. And you get out there, you say, well, maybe my life will start when I go to college. That'll be it. And you go through college, you think, nah, this is not it at all. It's just more of the same. Just studying. I just get to pick what classes I want, but it's the same old stuff. I get out of college. They tell me when you get married, that's when your life really begins. That's when it's great. So I'll get married. That's great. And then you find out that he makes funny noises that he never made before. Got pimples on his back. Can you imagine? Blah. It's just too much. So it's like, all right, marriage may not be it, but they tell me when you have your first kid, boy, when you have a child, that makes you kind of complete with the universe. So, all right, I'm not much now, all right? I'm not really a person yet. I'm sort of an apprentice person, okay? But when I have that child, then I'll be complete. And then you have a girl. Well, maybe I'll have a real child the next time. Only kidding, only kidding. They say that the divorce is the thing that really makes your life go. So as soon as I get this out of my life over here, and this person who's dragged me down all the time, that'll do it. Or maybe the real problem is, how did I get here anyway? My great-great-grandparents landed here, and I'm still here. What the hell am I doing here? That's it. I'll go to Houston. By the time I get to Houston, then I'll be. And it's this endless kind of thing, and maybe when I get a new job, that'll be it. They tell me when you get the promotion, boy, that's the thing that really makes your life start. What I've heard really is that when you retire, as soon as you retire, that's when life really gets going. And then you retire, and you hear people retire talking about the good old days. They never had one in their whole life. Because they're always postponing it. There's always this aversion to now. And now, it's like everything you do in your life, you do in this moment. Jackson Browne has a song, and in one of the lines of his songs, he said, no matter where I go, I can't help thinking I'm just a day away from where I want to be. Just a day away from where I want to be. There aren't many people who understand that that Carly Simon said, these are the good old days. These are the good old days. And getting into them and enjoying them and being able to be a person who's always goal setting, always thinking about the future, always consumed with what it's going to be like then, when they get to this point, they just simply set another one. And they're always a world of strivers, never arriving. They're doomed to eternal frustration rather than an appreciation of anything. You see, everything you do in this moment, everything you do in this moment, you feel guilty. Why would you feel guilty in a moment? Because you can use up this moment. The guilt can only take place now, like everything. So you use up this moment thinking about things that have already happened in the past, over which you have absolutely no control, and that's how you use up this moment. Guilt doesn't, you'll hear psychiatrists talking about it's living in the past. It's not living in the past. No one can live in the past. You can only live now, think using up now by reminiscing about the past, or feeling bad about the past, or worry. People say, I worry because I live in the future. You're not living in the future. You're just taking up this moment, being consumed with something that's going to happen in the future, over which you have no control. And it's such a sensible thing to do, is to get rid of that. Have you been looking at crazy things in the news lately? Suicide pacts? The suicide rate among children ages 8 to 12 has gone up 400% in 1 decade. 400%. What's going on? Children in therapy has gone up 700%. How come? Children having, quote, nervous breakdowns. Children with depression. Kids on tranquilizers. Type A toddlers. Type A toddlers. You know what type A is? Type A behavior. It's like you have to always get ahead. You have to do things fast. My daughter came home from school in the 2nd grade and said to me, I've got to get all A's. I said, why? For what? She said, well, the teacher told us if we didn't get all A's, we wouldn't get into college. I said, you're 7 years old. College is a little ways away yet. I mean, what is that for? Do you have to teach your children to read at 1 or in the womb? You know, holding up cue cards to them in the womb with like a sonogram, you know? Can you read this one yet? In the New York Times, they had a story about children 18 months old. Now, I got a daughter that age. I got a daughter every age, all right? She's in diapers. They're giving them entrance exams to get into nursery school so they can get into the right preschool, so they can get into the right grade school, and so they can get into the right college. 18 months old. Still saying wee-wee, caca, poo-poo, and doing that in their diapers. And they're going off to take tests. I mean, what kind of a test do you give an 18-month-old? The stress. I mean, who wants children filled with stress? What's wrong with just going out into the world and being 2 and 3 and enjoying it? Celebrate the present moments of your children's lives. Get rid of this notion that they're apprentice people, that they're on their way to becoming a person. A woman called me in Boston on a talk show and she said, if there's one thing, and you ever talk to parents or write about parenting, if there's one thing, she had lost her daughter to leukemia at 4. She said, teach them to value every moment they have. See them as whole. See them as complete now. Celebrate their 3-year-oldness. Love that. Play in that. Enjoy that. Let the rest of that work itself out. It will. It will. They're all on the path. We're all on this path together. They don't have to get ahead of the other guy in order to be happy. And all they'll get, even if they do get ahead of the other guy, is an ulcer as a reward. If they spend their whole life in this race, this rat race, trying to beat everybody else down, I mean, the purpose of life is to enjoy it and to help other people to do the same. And if you learn how to do that, you're not going to be selfish. You're going to never be a burden to anybody else in your life. Imagine being a person who always knows how to enjoy life. No matter what comes down the pike, imagine that. What a great notion, isn't it? You can never be a burden to anybody else. That's the least selfish thing you can do in life. The most selfish thing you can do is constantly be somebody else's burden. I did this for you, you have to do this for me. I invited you to my house, you haven't invited back. I sent out 343 Christmas cards last year. I only got 341 back. I'm going to find out who these people are that don't send me things back. And you go through life counting. Remember The Little Prince? Remember The Little Prince? If you haven't read it to your children. Read it out loud to them, even if they're 37. Read it out loud to them, all right? They need to hear that message, that parable, that wonderful parable of the prince who would meet people who were counting stars instead of enjoying them. His whole life was, I gotta find out how many there are. 3,468, 3,469. They spend their whole life just counting. They say in the East there's quite a difference. In the East, they contemplate the forest. And in the West, we count the trees. And there's a different philosophical approach to it. Melting that, merging that, bringing those notions together to raise children who are free from stress, who are free from anxiety, who understand the beauty of every moment, rather than counting it and categorizing it and getting a label put on it.
On the whole quality of complaining and whining, neurotics complain, neurotics whine, neurotics find fault. They don't like the way things are going. Things are always so bad. Things are never going to get any better. I just know that. They find fault almost everywhere you go. You ever get around people like that who are always finding fault with everything? And then there are people over here who kind of accept the world the way it is, but they really don't feel like they're active doers about it. And over here, you see, I think there are critics and complainers, and there are people who accept things, and then there are no limit people. These are doers. Doers at the highest level. They know that if anything is going to get changed in life, including themselves, that they can't sit around and complain about it to make it happen. And so they practice. And so you can practice. The things you don't like, complaining, fault-finding, blaming, wishing, hoping, they're all the tools that neurotics use. Whereas highly functioning, no-limit people are those who don't have time for the complaints. They have almost like an inner sense of their own destiny, an inner sense of their own mission. And they know they've only got so much time. We have a limited amount of time here, and the amount of time that I'm given is a blessing. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. To me, as Whitman said, every cubic inch of space is a miracle.
One of my favorite poets is Rumi, a Sufi poet who lived about 1,000 years ago. And he said, "Do you think I know what I am doing? That for one breath or half breath I belong to myself? As much as a pen knows what it's writing, or the ball can guess where it's going next." And he equated himself to this sort of being that was being propelled through life, and that he just sort of let go and let God, let go, and allowed this surrendering process to be the thing that just guided your life. And I must say that in most of my life, and this is over 50 years now, I've had very few goals. Very few goals. Now, I can hear arguments and I can hear the doubts, and because you've been exposed to this for your whole lifetime. And you say things like, well, if I want to go to the bathroom, I have to have a goal to get there. And I'm not here to dispute any of that, nor to make anybody wrong who believes in these things strongly. All I'm suggesting is that you can have satori, an instant moment of shifting around when you are ready and willing, and God works in very mysterious ways. If you have this readiness and you say, I'm just turning this whole problem, this whole struggle over, and I know that the universe, that this organizing divinity that is a part of everything, that is invisible, knows what it's doing, and I'm going to allow it to work through me, and I know that I'll be guided, and I'm not alone. And the moment that you have that awareness that you're not alone and that you're going to be guided, then goals don't seem to be nearly as significant or as important. Life is really what happens to you while you're making other plans. And there's an old story about if you really want to make God laugh, tell her your plans. When you let go and let God and stop this insistence that you have to have everything planned out and become free, then you begin to experience this heightened awareness. One of the suggestions I'd like to give for getting rid of this whole insistence that you have goals is just to be willing. Willingness is the key word here. If you are willing to do what it takes to turn whatever vision you might have into reality, then you'll begin to see the opportunities showing up. If you have to have it all planned up in a goal and set out while you're making your plan, you'll miss 200 opportunities. Another belief that most of us have hung on to for most of our lives because we've had it handed to us is that we believe that we always have to do our best. I hear this almost every single day from motivational speakers, from athletes. I have to do my best. I'd like to really challenge that. You don't have to be always performing and always doing things exactly at top level. As a matter of fact, that perfectionistic idea that things always have to be done perfectly is very often the thing that will keep you from achieving anything. As a doctoral student, I can remember, and as a doctoral advisor, after I received my own doctorate, I can remember having many students who would go through all of the coursework, and then they couldn't write their dissertation because they just couldn't get it right. And I'd say, look, you don't have to do your best at this thing. Just get it done if you ever want to be able to have your doctorate. Well, this isn't right and this word isn't there. And if you're constantly preoccupied with perfectionism, it will be spelled paralysis in the end, because you will be paralyzed and not be able to accomplish things. Get rid of that whole idea of best and just do. Just substitute doing for best. There's an ancient book of wisdom called the Tao Te Ching, and they comment in there on what it is that constitutes a sensible person. It says the 5 colors can blind, the 5 tones deafen, the 5 tastes cloy. The race, the hunt can drive men mad, and their booty leaves them no peace. Therefore the sensible man prefers the inner to the outer eye. And letting go of all of this perfectionistic idea that you have to do things a certain way is really moving to the inner rather than the outer eye, and not allowing yourself to be blinded and deafened and cloyed and saddened by the idea that you always have to do things in a certain way. One of the suggestions I would make for getting rid of this idea that you always have to do your best at everything that you do is stop imposing this on yourself and on your children. To get rid of that idea and instead replace that with, there's going to be a few things that I'm going to do very well, and maybe even my very best. Maybe a few, maybe 1 or 2. But all the rest of the things that I do in my life, I'm just going to do, and I'm going to enjoy them. And I'm going to take that pressure off of my children as well, because it's far more important for them to do and enjoy and be at peace and be blissful than it is to live with all of the ulcer-producing neurosis that comes from constantly being told that you could do a little bit better. You always have to do your best. Your best is really just an idea that the ego keeps promoting in you in order to keep you away from the higher part of yourself, which says you don't have to perform at all. You don't have to beat anybody. You don't have to do anything. You just have to be at peace, be at joy, be at bliss. And then whatever it is that you do, you will be unattached to the outcome anyway. You'll be in process. You'll just be enjoying the whole journey rather than seeking out all of these destinations that other people have imposed on you.
I think goals are very important for all of us to have. I think having a plan is really important and significant. I don't think it's healthy to fall in love with your plan. If you can't shift gears, if you can't, let's say you're on a trip, you're going out west, and you've made reservations all along the way, you know, to stop at a Holiday Inn or whatever, wherever you're stopping as you go along. And you get to a place that is really interesting and intriguing, where you've never been before. Maybe they're having a rodeo the next day in Amarillo or something, and you'd really like to stop and stay and see that, but you can't because your plan, your goals, your objectives are ruling you rather than you ruling your life. If you can't adjust and be flexible with the things you want for yourself, then I think that's unhealthy. Also, I think goal setting itself is healthy in the sense that you do it in the present moment. I'll give you an example in my own life. On October 21st of last year, I ran my very first marathon, 26.2 miles, all right? When I started running a year or so before that, I didn't have any idea about running a marathon. What I had an idea was that I wanted to be more physically fit in my own life, and I wanted to see if I could run each day, 1 day at a time, whatever my body said I could do, and at whatever pace I wanted to. And I started out doing that, and that was a goal for me. Did it 1 day, and the next day I said, would I like to try that again, even though my shins were hurting and I was out of breath and so on? I said, yes, I'll do it 1 more day, all right? After 3 or 4 weeks, instead of running 1.2 or 1.5 miles, I was running 2 miles. Not because I had upgraded my goal, my body allowed itself to go faster and to go a little bit further. It was just only natural. After continuing in that process of individual daily goals for myself, which is living in the present and enjoying yourself, you have an automatic kind of upgrading of those goals for yourself. Within a year, there I was at the starting line of a race to run 26 miles, which if you'd have said a year before I could do that, I would have thought, you must be crazy to think anybody would even want to run 26 miles. And it's an attitude. But like each goal that you have for yourself, let's say you want to lose weight. You want to quit smoking. You want to eliminate addictive behavior in your life, whatever it may be. The only way, it seems to me, that it's sensible to attack a problem like losing weight is to say to yourself, today, just today, or quitting smoking, just today can I go 24 hours, 1 day, or even a half a day, or even a few hours, without a cigarette, without eating sugar or whatever it may be. Can I do that? Well, the answer, of course. Anybody can go a day. That's no big deal. Well, the only way you get to live your life is in a day segment, even less than that. So you do that. Then what you are at the end of that 24-hour period, you are a new person. Now, if today you say to yourself, I'm only going to want a cigarette tomorrow anyway, who am I kidding? So I might as well have one now. Or I'm only going to want to have a hot fudge sundae tomorrow night, so why not have one tonight too? Or, geez, you mean I can never have another sundae the rest of my life? That'll drive you right to the refrigerator faster than anything, see? You don't do that because someday you may eat hot fudge sundaes every night. I have one, very often, whenever I feel like having one. But I add a whole lot of other dimensions to my life which permit that. So it's like you take that day and you say to yourself, at the end of this day, I now have 24-hour history of no nicotine in my body. So you take that one day. Now you're a different person. Let that person decide whether they want to go another day. Don't let the person who wants one right now. Let the person who's got 24 hours of success behind them decide. And then let the next person, the next day, and now you've got 48 hours behind you. Let that new person, because you're a new person every day. Anybody who's ever been in alcoholic treatment, Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's the only program that's had even a tiny bit of success, knows that their slogan, one day at a time, is the way that you handle that. You just deal with your life one day at a time. And you can have a lot of goals in this day and not be living in the future at all. But I'd be absurd to get up here and say, you should never have goals for yourself. So everybody has a goal. It's how much you can do it in the present moment, I think, that counts.
Since I've given up some of my attachment to having to be right, and since I've really embarked more on a path, and I don't even know how I got on this path, but it's just where I am, of sending out love and peace and harmony and contentment and so on, I've never had more, quote, success come into my life. The things that I write get read, and the tapes that I make get circulated. My demand for being a speaker and those kinds of things has increased, and people want me to do television shows and even to do my own and to write plays. People want me to do things and are inviting me to do things that never even came to me before. So success, quote, in all of those external fashions has come. Achievement has gone up. I mean, I have achieved at a higher level. My writing is better than it's ever been. I feel better about myself. I seem to be performing on stage and in my writing at a higher level. And yet I'm talking about going beyond all of those things. It's like that great irony, that great paradox that is always with us, is that when you get focused on what you want to do and not attached to the results, but just following your bliss, just keeping your bliss, and your bliss always being in the service of others, that all of those things that we seek so desperately, the success, the achievement, the performance, seem to follow after us and arrive in our life in the amounts that are absolutely necessary for taking care of us. But as long as we find ourselves pushing for them and demanding them and chasing after them and striving for them, then we never get to arriving. The only vehicle that's available to take us from striving to arriving is detachment from the fruits of our labors.
One of my close friends whom I quote frequently, his name is Edgar Mitchell. You may not recognize the name, but you'll remember the photos. Back in 1971, Ed Mitchell was the sixth man to walk on the moon. He was the Apollo 14 commander. And Edgar is a PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in nuclear physics. That's as left-brained as it gets, folks. That's as scientific and left-brained as you can be, and was trained as a scientist. And he had what I talk about in Real Magic, what I call a satori experience while he was on the moon. And I've shared many evenings with him talking about his walking on the moon, what that was like. We have in our living room a large photograph of the Earth taken from the surface of the moon, signed by Dr. Mitchell. A very beautiful memento indeed. And This word satori is something that came across in reading on some books on Eastern philosophy for real magic. And it translates roughly in English to instant awakening. An instant awakening. See, most of us in the West have come to believe that in order to awaken or to be enlightened or to reach certain levels of achievement or to be successful and so on, we have to follow a prescribed set of rules and dogma. And those rules are handed to us by other people as we go through our developmental processes. And we believe that you have to set goals, and you have to struggle, and you have to sacrifice, and you have to work hard, and you have to go to school, and you have to get the proper training, and you have to find somebody who knows more than you do, and you have to be an apprentice, and then eventually you work your way up the ladder, and ultimately we reach this place called enlightenment or success or whatever you want to call it. And that is a possibility for all of us. Certainly it's one way to get there. It takes a long time. Sometimes we get there and then it's over. But it's still a way. Right? And then when you read Eastern philosophy and you become engrossed in the power of the mind and the power of the divine intelligence that flows through all of us, and you look at spiritual masters who've walked among us over the centuries, you discover that there's another way. And that other way is like in an instant, in a moment. It's like, and most of us can trace back to the very significant and dramatic changes that we have had take place in our own lives to an instant, to a moment. And then we walk away and leave it behind. So here's Ed Mitchell walking on the moon, 1971, and he looks to his left, and he can see an infinity of heavenly bodies hurling through space at thousands of miles per hour, all synchronized in a collaboration with eternity. All just absolutely moving in harmony. And he's standing on the moon. Try to visualize yourself there. And then he looks to his right, and he can see this blue quarter shining in the sky. And that's the Earth. That's what it looks like, about the size of a quarter from standing on the moon. Bright blue like our sky. And he said he had this awareness that everything that we've ever worried about or consumed ourselves with or been troubled by was on this quarter. This quarter. And beyond the quarter was more heavenly bodies just hurling all movement. And every problem, every difficulty, every war, whether or not our children are going to grow, whether our business is going to work, whether it didn't work, that back, Genghis Khan, I mean, it doesn't, cavemen, Neanderthal ages, Ice Age, all of it. It's on this quarter. And he's standing here. And he said he had this like satori, this instant awakening. And it was that this is an intelligent system that we are all a part of. And I said, Ed, you would think that someone with a PhD from the most prestigious university in the world in the study of science would know that before they got into the capsule. He said, no. He said, we studied how to be in charge of matter and how to be in charge of our world. We never studied the spiritual consequences of travel in space. And he said he came back from the moon, from the Apollo 14 flight, and he left the space program, he left NASA, and since that time, for the last 21 or 22 years, he founded the Institute for Noetic Sciences, and he has been lecturing about the spiritual implications of space travel and what it did to him as a human being. His talks are wonderful. Now, if that is true, just accept that that is true, that this is an intelligent system that we are a part of, that there's an intelligence about it that flows through it all. And you also are a part of that intelligence. that is your life here, from the time that you showed up until the time that you leave, in this parentheses in eternity, which is your life. It opens parentheses in that split second when one drop of human protoplasm collides with another, and everything you needed for this physical journey is handled for you. It's all handled. And that's the physical journey. But there's also another journey that you're on that is not physical, that divine, formless, unbounded intelligence that flows through you and watches this physical you go through all of its motions. And you sort of stand back and you become like an observer to your own life. And you're watching it do all of the things that it does. Strange and wonderful things are happening to your form all the time. I know strange and wonderful things have been happening to my form since I showed up here. And I watch it all. And I'm intrigued by it, but I never identify with it. I'm detached from it. I'm observing it. I'm watching it.
What do you think a no-limit person would do if they arrived at a party and they found out that everybody had dressed formally and they had dressed casually? He wouldn't even notice. He's not focused, or she's not focused on external appearances. Not focused on what other people are wearing, or how they look, or how I look. They simply understand that dressing is just something that you do, and you do it based upon what you feel like wearing. Now, this is not to say that this person is going to show up at a formal affair with tennis shoes and a loincloth. In other words, that would be a person who is still trying to impress other people with their uniqueness and their differences. And the fact that you have to impress other people, it means that other people's impressions are what are controlling you. No-limit people have controls from within. Always controls from within. That's the important concept here. Control from within. So that they dress based not upon what other people are going to say or think or feel or do, or how other people are attired. They dress based upon what seems to make sense for them, and when they arrive someplace, they don't say, oh my God, you've got jeans on and I don't, or you wore this and I've got to go home and change so that I can be just like everybody else. They don't notice. Somebody else has to point that out to them. And that's very different than some of the stuff you'll hear some people in the profession talking about how important it is to be concerned about everything that you wear, and you got to wear the right handkerchief, and you have to wear this, and what you wear is really important. I've never concerned myself with that. It's never been an issue for me. And I've never found that it's been anything that's had much of an effect in my life. I mean, if I do show up someplace and everybody else is dressed different, nobody cares, and it doesn't make any, and I enjoy my meal just as much, or whatever it may be, and that's just the end of it. It's the concept of not noticing that's really crucial in this whole area of living at the highest level. What we have to do to understand this business of self-love or self-acceptance is to get at this notion that purpose in life and what you're here for and what you're doing is something that finds you. It isn't something that you find. You get yourself unclogged. You get the junk out of you. You get the hatred, the anger, the fear, all of the kinds of thoughts that are put-downs of the self, self-contemptible kinds of thoughts, self-rejecting thoughts, all right? You get rid of those, and you get centered. Robert Frost said, we all sit around in a ring and suppose, while the secret sits in the center and knows. The secret that sits in the center and knows is what the centering process is about. It's what no-limit living is about. It can't be the force that operates in your life if it's clogged up with something else, all right? I think of it like a container. And if you have a container that's full of manure, there's no room in the container for love or for anything else that goes into it. And we all have manure in our lives, okay? But it's knowing what to do with the manure that's really important, all right? I mean, everybody has that in their life. But if you take the manure and put it into the ground and use it for fertilizer, you can grow beautiful flowers with it, all right? So it isn't whether you have manure in you, it's knowing what to do with it and where to put it so that you can create flowers or bread or whatever it is that you want to create. The centering process is really commensurate with self-love and self-acceptance. And the centering process is more than just a metaphysical term. It is a total acceptance of where I am and who I am and where everyone else is, and a non-judgmental, balanced approach, a physical balance and a mental balancing of everything, and an acceptance without judging. It's like seeing the world as it is, not as I would like it to be, and no negativity attached to it. That when you get to that, when you're able to think that way, then the all-consuming notion of, oh, am I valuable, am I worthwhile, that's a real low-level place for people to be. When you're questioning your value, you're questioning your worth, your whole esteem as a human being, when you question that, when you even ask the question, am I valuable or am I important, you're operating at a real low level. When you're always focused on, I've got to prove my value on the basis of getting you to like me, that's another low level, all right? Or I've got to prove my value or esteem as a human being based upon being successful, that is, achieving a whole lot of things. You see, everything in the universe comes in paradox, because we are in paradox, because the planet is in paradox. I mean, think about it. The paradox that you are is that you are form and non-form at the same time. You are your body, and yet you're not your body at the very same time. You are your thoughts, which you can't get a hold of, and yet you're your body, and so you always have these two conflicting kind of things. Well, our planet is like that. I mean, our planet is like a magnet. If you think of a magnet, it's got a plus on one side and a negative on the other side. It is a whole that is a combination of opposites. All right? It's always a combination of opposites. Everything in life that has any significance comes in paradox. And it's like that magnet. I mean, how can one thing be two opposites and still be one thing? How can a human being be someone who wants love and wants to get it, chases love and never gets it? And the person who doesn't care about whether they get love and just is love, has love come into their life all the time. The person who wants the most approval in life and goes after it and demands it based upon something that is lacking inside of them, never gets approval. They don't get the approval. But the person who doesn't care about approval, I mean, think of the person who gets the most approval in your life. And that's somebody who doesn't even care about it. Why does someone who doesn't care about approval get approval, and someone who tries to get approval never gets approval? Because someone who wants to get approval is doing a disapproving thing. I mean, who wants to be around people who always want to be approved of? It's an irony. It's a paradox. And most people's reason for having self-doubt is that they start from a premise that I call lacking, that something is lacking. When you do the whole psychology of motivation, you find that most people are motivated based upon what Maslow called deficiency motivation. That is, they start from the premise that something is wrong, something is missing in me, and my motivation is going to be to repair the deficiency. I'm not strong enough. I'm not rich enough. I'm not happy enough. I have something lacking, all right? No limit people aren't motivated by deficiency. They're motivated by growth, all right? Where I am is where I've chosen to be. There's nothing wrong with what I've chosen to be. I can still grow. If you look at a flower that is alive and you look at a flower that is dead, you say, what's the difference between the two? One is growing, one isn't. If you look at a human being that is alive and another one one is growing and one isn't. Growth and life are the same thing. Growth motivation means I don't start from the premise that anything that I've ever been up until now is anything other than what I had chosen up until then and what I knew how to do. It's not lacking, it's not deficient, but I can go in this direction. But I'm always going from the premise that where I am at this moment is fine. That's what self-love is. Where I'm going at this moment is fine. Where I'm going at this moment is fine. And where I will get to and where I am now are equally okay, are all right. That's what self-love is. You are not going to get it all. You are it all. You are not going to arrive at happiness. Happiness is the way. You're not going to be a healthy, happy, successful person if you do all of these things that are missing in your life now. Because if you cannot appreciate everything that you have right now in your life, I mean really appreciate everything that you are and have right now, you don't need another thing. What do you need something else for? You'll just be in a new position to not appreciate something else. Your limitation is an inability to accept and love where you are right now. When you get that you have to be able to take every moment of your life and see it as complete and whole and total, then all you have to do is see that in the next step you'll be there too. And on the things that you think you really want are going to start arriving in your life. The irony, the paradox again. The less you chase them, and the more you're just focused on being centered, and the secret in the center that knows, the self-love that is there, what you have to do will be very clear. And what you need for yourself in your life will arrive in your life in amounts sufficient to take.
The key to a positive self-image, it seems to me, is self-confidence. And self-confidence is something that doesn't happen to you. A lot of people get confidence all mixed up. They say things like this to themselves. I want to be a dancer. I want to be a writer. I want to be an actor. I want to, whatever it may be. I want to be an executive. And they say, I want to dance. I just want to get out there and I want to be a dancer. I say, well, why don't you go out there and dance? You know, get out there and do it a lot. And audition for every show that comes along and dance, you know, take lessons from all of the top dancers. No, I don't have any confidence. As soon as my confidence is increased, then I'm going to be a great dancer. They get it all mixed up. You see, the only way you get confidence to be a great anything is by first going out and doing it, and doing it, and doing it again and again and again. And after a while, you begin to... Confidence comes from behavior. Confidence comes from risk-taking, from not worrying about failing, from not being so consumed about whether somebody else is going to laugh at you, not being afraid to fall down. The difference between a neurotic and a no-limit person are both of them are climbing a hill together, you see. And there's a big patch of ice that neither one of them expected, and they both fall down. The neurotic stays there, whines, complains, says there's not supposed to be ice in April. They promised us this on our itinerary. There'd be no ice. It's not fair. Look I cut my new clothes. That's not right. You see, and they complain about it. Whereas the no-limit person just gets up and kind of dusts himself off and says, watch out for the ice, you know, and keeps right on moving. They allow failures to be something that mobilize them, whereas people without self-esteem or self-confidence allow failures to immobilize them. They go out and they try something and they're not successful at it. They're 12 years old, and they walk in and they say, I would like to be principal of this school, or I would like to be the president of the National Bank of Detroit, you know. Well, we don't need any 12-year-old presidents. See, I told you I couldn't be anything. That's the kind of attitude that they have. Whereas the fully functioning person goes, well, if I can't be president here, maybe I could sweep floors in a bank in Toledo or whatever, and uses their rejections and their failures to go on and try other things. The essence, it seems to me, of achieving self-confidence is doing. I hear, I forget. I see, I remember. I do, and I understand. And not one moment before. If you don't have self-esteem, if you don't have self-confidence in yourself, get up off of your rear end and do anything that will make you feel a little bit better about yourself, and then do it again, and do it again, and before long, you'll be a person who has confidence. I said, I remember the very first time that I had to give a book report in school, what I felt like the night before, knowing the kind of friends I had who were pointing to you like your fly was open and all of the other things that they do. And how frightened I was, and saying, please, please, maybe the teacher will have a stroke, you know, and she'll lose her memory and won't remember there's a Wayne Dyer in the class. Anything, hoping for anything, so I didn't have to get up there. And I said, how do you get to a point where you can walk out in front of thousands of people and talk? It didn't just happen. That was a frightful experience. You do it once, you do it again, and before long, it becomes something that is easy and fun and exciting for you. And the other part of that self-confidence is that you don't equate your image of yourself as a human being with how well you do things in life. You are not what you do. If you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't, right? You don't exist. If you are your business, if you are how much money you make, if you are your home, if you are your family, If you are your children, if that's what you are, and those things go away, and they always do. They always do. Life is very transitory. If you lose your job, and you will, somebody along there is going to come along and take it from you. That's the nature of the way it works. If that means your self-image is tied up with that, then when your job goes, when that promotion doesn't come, when the house goes, when the children leave, when your spouse dies, whatever it may be, then you die a little bit too. But if you are what you believe you are, and if you allow yourself to fail at some things and do well at other things, and to take risks and so on, and you don't confuse your worth as a human being with what you do in life. You see what you do in life as choices, but you never, ever compromise on this one choice. You are always a valuable, worthwhile human being, not because anybody else says so, not because you're successful, not because you make a lot of money, but because you decide to believe it and for no other reason. If you don't understand that, you won't have a handle on being a no-limit person.
If you weren't allowed to be a child when you were a child, what I suggest that you do with that is you understand that even as a child you take over very young. And you don't blame your parents, especially if you're an adult now. You don't blame your parents for what you could or couldn't do or what you were able or not able to do in life. I was a teacher for many years, and I know that you cannot teach English literature to someone who doesn't want to learn it. You cannot teach algebra to someone who doesn't want to learn it, who refuses to. And you cannot take away a person's childhood unless we're talking about just absolute outright physical abuse, which is a different subject altogether. When we're talking about human beings who lived in a family situation in which their parents, they feel as children, especially over the age of 4 and 5, kept them from doing all of these kinds of things, that you have to take responsibility for how you reacted to your parents. And this is what I used to always tell my clients. You didn't know how to deal effectively with your father. You didn't know how to get what you felt you were entitled to from your mother or from your grandparents or whatever. Yes, but they were bigger, and I was like, yes, I understand all of that. Yes, you were small and they were large and they set the rules and all that. But you still didn't know how to get what it is that you want. And in families, where there's 3, 4, and 5 children, you'll find that some children in the family are able to figure out how to have a happy childhood, even in a situation which other people would construe as negative. And others are just beaten down by it and feel that somebody else controlled them or did this to them. So that I think it's important to even go back through your whole life and take responsibility for how you reacted. Everything after the age of 4 and 5, I think children take over very early. Now, this is not to say that the influence of a parent isn't significant and can't have a significant effect on a child. But it doesn't do you any good to look back with blame. What you have to do is look back with responsibility, responding with ability. It's never too late to have a happy childhood. Well, that's a very important concept, all right? And people would be in my office and they'd say, well, my mother would never let us roll down a hill, and she would never let us get dirty, and one lady said my mother would never let me ride a bicycle. And I said, well, okay, there's a hill over there, and there's dirt over there, and there's bicycles over here, and there's swimming pools over here, and you can virtually have anything that you wanted. And they would say, well, I didn't come here and pay you the kind of money I'm paying you to teach me how to ride a bicycle. I said, well, if you understand that the only reason you don't know how to ride a bicycle is because you've never gotten on one and actually gone through the trial and error that goes with learning anything, and if you stopped blaming your mother for the fact that you couldn't stand up to her throughout your life and just go ahead and do it anyway. I mean, if my mother or father or anybody, a stepfather that I had, would have told me that you can't ride a bicycle, there's no possibility that I would have paid very much attention to that. Yet you did, for some reason. That's where you were, where I was able to get on a bicycle and make it happen. So you take responsibility for it, always. Then you don't have to spend endless hours in therapy and going through deep analysis to figure out why you were toilet trained harshly, or why your mother liked your sister better, or any of those kinds of things that you hear people using as excuses for why they're not where they want to be in their life. We take over early. What I would always do as a professional counselor and training professional counselors and therapists was to teach the children, even teach young people, that if they've got parents who behave in ways that they find intolerable, Don't blame the parents for the way that you're feeling in your life. It isn't doing you any good to just toss out a lot of blame and say, oh, they're old-fashioned, or they have a lot of rules that they impose on me, or they're abusive towards me, or they don't know what it's like in this generation. Figure out how to be effective within the constraints of the relationship that you are in right now. How can you get the things that you would like to have for yourself in your life and still not always be in conflict and not always be upset and always be blaming somebody else? Your parents are the way they are. When a kid would come into me and say, I'm having trouble with my science class, my science teacher, he just doesn't like me, I'd say, what is your goal in science? And hardly ever is a child's goal in science to learn science. Their goal is to get through science and not have to repeat it and to move on. And if they learn some science, that's nice, all right? So I would say to them, you're getting thrown out of science class. Your science teacher is mad at you. You're mad at your science teacher. You're not reaching any of your goals. And it looks to me like you're going to have to repeat science again the way that you're going. Why not focus on a solution? Why not focus on what am I doing here? What do I want out of this experience? And then instead of wishing my science teacher were different, and as adults we all do the same thing, you know, we forget what our goals are.
If I stood up here and were to cut my hand, and then you were to look at my hand and just watch it, you would see that in a very short time the wound would close up. If it stayed open, what would happen is that the disease process would set in. There would be sepsis or disease, there would be infection, and if I continued to keep it open by just pushing it open, making sure that it didn't close, I would eventually die. The organism couldn't live, because the natural tendency of a wound is for it to close up and heal. Now, when we get into the spiritual dimension and the psychological dimension, what happens is that we get wounds from our childhood and from our past. We were only children, we were abused, we were abandoned, we had in-laws that were a certain way, or parents that were a certain way, we had alcoholics for parents, we had to be put into orphanages, we were around drug addiction, we were poor, we were rich, whatever it is. We have all of this stuff in our past, and what happens is that we bond to it. And we use these wounds of our past for attention. We use these wounds of our past for pity, and very often we lead with these wounds. So that when I introduce myself, it isn't very long before someone knows that I'm the child of an alcoholic, or that I was an alcoholic myself, or that I was abandoned, or I was abused, or whatever. And we keep hauling out these wounds. And one of the reasons we don't heal in our lives and we don't manifest in our lives is because we are attached to these things in our past. Rather than saying, whatever it is that happened to me, whatever lesson I had to learn from it, I got it. I've got the lesson. And now that I have the lesson, I no longer want to be attached to it and have that venom continue to pour through me and keep me from healing. So I let go of that. And most people whose lives are not filled with the things that they would like to see manifested for themselves are experiencing this because they're back there hanging on. How can you possibly talk to me when this is what happened to me when I was a child? How can you possibly say these things to me when don't you know what I've been through? You hear this, and if you don't do it with yourself, you do it with others. And if you don't do it with others, you do it with yourself. It's backwards and forwards all the time. And it comes from this sort of hallucination that we have that says, I and everybody else is entitled to a perfect pain-free childhood. And the fact is that whatever you needed to go through in your life in order to get the lessons of why you're here, you went through them. And all of those things, as you look back on them, you can either take them and say, they taught me how to be stronger, or you can say, poor me, and lead with them and keep opening that wound.
And one of the greatest things that you can learn in your life is the understanding that as you go through your life, even the people who love you the most are not going to approve of you half of the time. Somebody says, you're a nerd. Terrible thing. I mean, one of the things you have a choice. You say, oh my God, they know. They've discovered it already. And you act like a neurotic. You have that choice. you have other choices as well. The choice to ignore that, the choice to say that's somebody else's opinion. If somebody says to me, Wayne Dyer, I don't like your books. Well, I expect that when you say something in public, when you talk to a lot of people, when you write something, that there are going to be a lot of people who aren't going to like what you say. One of the highest levels, one of the highest places you can get to in your life is a place called being independent of the good opinion of other people. Not necessarily needing everyone to approve of you all of the time. And we ought to have a lot of people out there who understand that, so that when they go through their lives and they run into disapproval, that instead of becoming depressed about that, that you understand that that's a condition. That's what it means to be a human being. I'm saying don't become immobilized ever by what anybody else thinks of you. And when you do, understand that all you are doing is saying your opinion of me is more important than my own opinion of myself. Every time you're down. Every time you're down. That you are making other people's opinions of you more important. Now, a great misinterpretation there is that somehow this is a selfish philosophy. Believe me, there's nothing selfish in that. One of the simplest learnings that all children seem to understand, the very simple understanding that you can't give away what you don't have. You can't give away what you don't have, obviously. You can't give away $100 if you don't have it. You can't give away love for others if you don't have it for yourself. You can't give away success if you don't have it for yourself. You can't love another human being at all if you don't love yourself first. And think of yourself as a worthy person. So that if you want to be a great altruist, a philanthropist, somebody who loves everybody in the world, then you've got to get your own house in order. And that's all I'm saying. Get your own house in order, your own self in order, so that you can become one of those people that have transcended, who have gone beyond simply worrying about how they're going to cope with their lives.
On our planet, you can't give away what you don't have. And if you don't have love for yourself, then you can't be loving to others. You can't give something away that you don't have. So self-love is the name of the game as far as being a no-limit human being. And but it has nothing to do with conceit. And a lot of people confuse that. They assume that if you love yourself, then you're conceited. Conceit is another form of approval seeking. If I have to tell you how great I am in order for me to feel good about myself, then your opinion of me is what is controlling me. And that's just approval seeking. It's like giving up control of myself in order for you to like me. But if you have what I call a quiet love affair with yourself, the self-actualizing or no-limit person, which is the person we're talking about here, if you ask the question, do you love yourself, would probably respond, I never thought about it. It's not anything I give any attention to. Or, of course I do. It's what I am. I mean, why wouldn't I love what I am? Because self-love is already a given. The no-limit person is so busy being, so focused on purpose and what they're about and what they're here for, that they don't have time to notice what their neighbors are doing or what anybody else is saying about them. They don't even have time to notice it. I have a very, very strong belief that everyone that comes into our life, everyone, from the stranger sitting next to us on the bus, to the person driving next to us on the freeway, to our children, our husbands and wives and parents and all of that, they all come to us as teachers. And that the key to being effective and awakening in our lives is to be students rather than teachers. To see them all as someone who has something to teach us, otherwise they wouldn't be there. You begin to look at it that way, you take away some of your supercilious attitudes and your holier than thou, better than somebody else, elitist kind of thinking, and you begin to look at, what does this person have to teach me? In all my traveling all over the world, if I'm in Istanbul and I meet a beggar standing there with one arm and one leg, I know that that person has something to teach me, that they're in my life for something, whether it's And I can learn something from that person. And it may just be to be a little more generous and to give a little more. Or it may be to just give a smile or to be loving or whatever, but there's a lesson there for us. Imagine in some parts of the world, like in India, there are places in India where children are taught that they can put out fire with their minds. And then they train their minds and they work on their minds and they go inward and they meditate regularly. There are places in the world where holy men can be buried for 6 and 7 days at a time and they can literally bring their heart rate down to 0 and step out of it and survive. I mean, we think that that's not possible, that our minds aren't capable of that. We have to rid ourselves of all skepticism about what can be achieved for ourselves. And the way that you do that is through a wonderful old Zen proverb that most of us have never really looked at in depth. And the proverb is, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Now, it doesn't mix with what you have been taught about doubt and fear. You've been taught to doubt that things will appear for you just because you have a readiness. But let's look at the 4 key words in this concept. The first is the word student. See, you've got to stay a student in life. You've got to understand that you have to have a willingness to allow yourself to learn anything or unlearn anything at any time. A student is someone who decides not to be an expert, who is always, instead of responding with, "Oh, I already know that. Oh, you can't tell me anything new about that. Oh, I've lived a long time and you can't teach an old dog new tricks," and all of these kinds of statements and belief systems and knowings, which are doubts and fears of discovering something new. You create a new mindset, if you will. And the new mindset is, gee, that's interesting. I've never heard of that before. Yeah, I never heard it quite put that way. I'd like to examine that. I'd like to see if that might have some validity for me. So what we want to do is to make a commitment to ourselves to stay a student. Now, a student is someone who learns from everyone. A student isn't just someone who goes to class and takes notes and passes an exam and gets a scratching on a transcript someplace. A student is someone who sees the fullness of God in everyone and everything. And when you do that, even the person who is behaving in a way that you think is nasty, you see that fullness of God in them, and you begin to say, what has this person got to teach me? What is this anger that is coming out of them? What can I do with that? How can I use this and perhaps help them with it? How can I serve a little bit better? You become a student. You do it with your children. I'm the first one to admit that I slip, and it doesn't always work for me, and there are many times when I forget, and then afterwards I sort of rehash it and say, oh, I should have done it this way, or if only I would have done it that way. But it's that wonderful reminder to stay a student. And if you keep that attitude, it will help you to unlearn some of the things that tell you that, well, if I'm bigger than somebody else, like I'm an adult and you're a child, that I'm a complete person and you're not. Well, children are not apprentice people. They're whole, they're complete, they're total. And if you're a parent, you know that they have something to teach you from the moment of their conception. Because the birth of a child, or the conception of a child, is such a wonderful gift, such a phenomenal miracle, that it every time, and we've had 8 of them, every single time that my wife has gone through the experience of childbirth and feeling that soul growing within her, we are just in awe of the miraculousness of this. And we don't treat that little, especially when the baby is born. I mean, the first moment, my wife always, she'd take the little baby and say, oh, we're so glad that you're here. You have so much to teach us. We're so glad that you're with us, and we feel that way about them all the time. Keep in mind that you're in a constant state of change in your life. You're continuously learning how not to behave and what new talents and intellectual skills and personality variables to use. The old ones no longer work. That's what you have to remind yourself. Instead of saying, I've always done things that way and I'm just an aggressive person by nature, now you can say, now I know better. Obviously, when your sister used to hit you when you were 6 years old, or you used to hit her when you were angry at her, or vice versa, now you know better. When you get mad at your sister now and you're an adult, you don't go over and hit her. You know better. You've learned something new. And the same thing is applicable to everything. You don't have to say, I don't have the talent to do something, just like I know better than to say, I'm just inferior, I'll never learn how to walk. I guess I'll just have to crawl for the rest of my life. You didn't say that then. Today you know better. And even for me to say that I couldn't write a book about manifesting miracles, at one time I believed that. Now I know better. Getting that notion in you that now I know better, 4 key words, is an indication that you're trusting that invisible intelligence that's within you to go beyond that which you've accepted as just your fate in life. And you're beginning to say, hey, I can raise my IQ, I can raise my talent level, I can change around the things that I've always believed about what my family did to me in my life. Your family came to you in exactly the same perfect way that everything else came to you. I mean, you don't look at your liver and say, I wish I'd have gotten a different liver. Or you don't look at your tonsils and say that they're the wrong tonsils or that the wrong eyeballs. Everything that you got was in divine order. Your family is just as much a part of that. And you had something to learn from them, and you don't question any of that. And if there's things that happened in that family that you wish wouldn't have happened, you can get on with forgetting about wishing that something wouldn't have happened, forgive, and move past it, but celebrate it and understand it. Stop seeking out opinions on your personality and who you are as a human being. Asking nothing of anyone in the way of assessment. You're forgetting about looking to IQ tests to determine your abilities. Look instead to your own divine awareness of your unlimited abilities. Forget about what other people are saying regarding your talent or your fitness for anything, and consult your own inner personal advisor. Other people may give you this realistic assessment of your abilities and be the critics. There are 2 things about you. There's your reputation, and then there's your character. And there's nothing you can do about your reputation. If you go out into the world and you give a talk, or you write a book, or you do anything in the world, you're going to have hundreds of reputations. If I give a talk to 1,000 people, I have 1,000 reputations. I can't do a thing about that because my reputation is not located within me. It's located in how other people choose to process me. That's what a reputation is. But I can be responsible for my character. I can be responsible for how I choose to assess who I am. And that's something that I only have to answer to with myself, with God, with my own personal members of my family, or whatever, or whomever I choose. And it is nothing to do with what other people think of me or how other people choose to process me. So by not looking outside of yourself for the opinions on what you can do, what you can accomplish, how far you can go, how smart you are, how talented you are, without having to go to other people, you now are looking inward and asking yourself and reminding yourself that I am divine, I am in perfect order, I am a part of this universe, that divine intelligence flows through me. There are no accidents in this universe, and because there are no accidents, my personality is just exactly what it's supposed to be. It's only what I've chosen for it to be. And if what I have chosen in the past isn't what I want it to be, then I'm going to manifest that which I do. And all that I manifest in the physical world comes from how I process it inwardly.
The greatest cause of stress in our world is being in an unresolved relationship. Not a divorce, not a marriage, not the change of jobs, not losing a job, not losing someone close to you. It is living on a daily basis in a relationship which you know is unresolved. I don't know if I'm going to be there, if this is what I should be, if I shouldn't be. I don't know. I'm thinking about it. I'm hoping that he'll change. I'm waiting. I've been waiting 28 years. He still hasn't changed. Maybe things will get better, and so on. Living like that, whether it's 28 years or 28 hours. Resolving, living in unconflicted love means I can look out into the world and the people that I love, whether it's 1 or 200 or whoever I come across, whether it's every child and every animal and certainly many, many people, and unconditionally in an unconflicted way say, I can love you And my definition is that you don't have to meet my expectations, and I don't want to be told to meet yours. And if you can just pass that test, you're in unconflicted love. If you're not, resolve it. Resolve it. Whether it's getting it back together and making it work on a daily basis, or getting the hell out of it, you will be in a better position either way. Unconflicted love. And finally, these people who share the secrets of the universe, who seem to understand what I've been talking about, they are what we call growth motivated rather than deficiency motivated. Most of us are motivated by our deficiencies. I want to improve myself, so that I'll do this. This is improvement. You don't have to be sick to get better. You don't have to look at yourself as in bad shape in order to grow. Everything in the universe is exactly as it should be. If you stop judging it, including yourself, and go to work and resolving the things that you don't like and accepting those you can do nothing about, and literally run your life on where I am is just fine, and this is where I'm going, and each day is just fine. That's called growth motivation. Because the cosmic erroneous zone, the biggest one, the big one, the one that hardly anybody can resolve, because they're always caught up in those qualities I talked about earlier, like size and authority and acquisitions and achievement and rules. The biggie. You resolve this one, you got your life in order. Ladies and gentlemen, there is absolutely no way to happiness. Happiness is the way.
Question of whose advice to follow and what other people's opinions mean in life boils down to understanding that other people's opinions are just that. And that's very important. Another person's opinion is not truth. At least it's not your truth. It's not necessarily reality. It's not necessarily the best. It's not necessarily anything. It is somebody else's opinion. Opinions are of very little value. It's only your commitments. It's what you do with your opinions that makes all the difference in the world, not what your opinion is about something. And so, what I have learned to do with other people's opinions is, first of all, to see them as their opinions, which means that they can't hurt me, they can't destroy me, they can't make me into anything less than I am as a human being. They simply are other people's opinions. Now, I've established for myself that my reputation is a meaningless concept. Everybody's reputation is a meaningless concept. Because if you go out, whoever you are, whether you're a businessman, whether you're a student, whether you're a parent, or all of those things, and you go out into the world and you do something. Let's say I go out in front of 1,000 people and I speak. There are 1,000 opinions that are all unique and different from each other, and I don't know what any of them are. And that's what constitutes my reputation. My reputation is located in other people's opinions. That's what a reputation is. So I don't care about my reputation. I'm not interested in it at all, because I have no control over it. None whatsoever. What other people think of me is where they are. Whatever I do, however, whatever level I'm doing, if I'm in Carnegie Hall or if I'm just with a friend of mine in a business, what other people think of me is just that. Terry Cole Whitaker wrote a book called, a great title, one of the greatest titles of any book I've ever heard. Her title of her book was, "What You Think of Me Is None of My Business." It's none of my business. So my reputation, since it's located in other people exclusively, is something that I have no control over. I mean, I go out and give a talk. I've given talks many times. I've been on The Tonight Show many times, and I will get letters, and I will be telling a joke. And it will be just a joke. It'll be just a funny little remark. And I will get 50 letters. And one of the letters will say, that was a funny joke. That was really terrific. You were sensational, all right? So you got to put that, that's an imposter. You have to put that imposter over here. And somebody else says, how dare you make a joke like that? That's not a funny thing to say at all. That's another imposter. You put that over here. And someone else will say, I didn't think what you said was appropriate. It was in bad taste. And you put that one over there. And you understand that all of those things are your reputation. And they're all different. And none of them have anything to do with me. I was telling a joke. I don't know where you are. So I've learned not to be concerned with my reputation, but instead to be concerned with my character. And that I'm in charge of. All right? I'm always in charge of that. I can never be in charge of how other people are going to perceive me, because that's their opinion, and they're all entitled to it. I mean, on the very same day, about a month ago, I got 2 letters on pulling your own strings. And one of the letters said that it was the greatest book that he had ever written. It had changed his life completely, and he had given me all of this credit for the transformation that had taken place in his life as a result of reading Pulling Your Own Strings, which I had written many, many years before. The very same day, in the same mail, was a letter from somebody who told me that he wanted a refund. He said, it's so bad that I insist that you or your publisher send me back the refund for the book, all right? And what I did with the letters is I sent the real nice one to the guy who had written me the bad one, and I sent the bad one, I just had him Xeroxed, and sent it to the guy who had written the good one, and said, these are both imposters. And I wrote the great line that H.L. Mencken always used to write to anybody who wrote him letters. He always just said, you may be right. Not, I'm right and you're wrong, or whatever. You may be right. And I just signed my name and sent them off to them. I mean, it just shows you how silly it is to go around being consumed by what other people think. What other people think is just that. Now, supposing you take somebody else's advice and you mess up, all right, and it doesn't work for you. The no-limit person is someone who understands that everything you do in life, you did because you were supposed to do it, otherwise you wouldn't have done it, and the evidence is that you did it. All right, so the evidence for that you're supposed to do things is that you did it. You can't not do it. You can't should have done anything, or if only doesn't exist. So you did it. Now you have a couple of choices to make about taking somebody else's advice. First of all, you understand that it wasn't their advice. If I have a stockbroker and he gives me advice to buy this stock and it goes down, it wasn't his advice that made me buy the stock. It was my own advice. It was, I took his opinion and I internalized it, and I said to myself, I would like to make some fast money on buying this stock, and I would like the stock to go up, and he says that it will, but I'm believing it. I'm buying it. It's mine, and I am then saying I will buy it. I can't blame him if the stock goes down. I can say to myself, all right, I'm going to get a different stockbroker, but I take responsibility for the losses that I've encountered. Now, you treat the loss as an opportunity. I mean, everything that happens to you that is considered negative or that is considered a failure or a loss is a hidden opportunity. And the seeds for all solutions to all problems are in the problem itself. The cure is in the illness. The cure is always in the illness. Otherwise, you don't need a cure. If there's no illness, do you need a cure? Of course not. I mean, there's no sickness there. So that a cold has within it the opportunity to transcend a cold. Being an alcoholic has within the alcoholism the seeds for transcending something about yourself that was controlling you before. So that reformed alcoholics, the first thing they do is they celebrate their alcoholism. It was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. It made me face something in myself. You ought to be the most grateful to the people that you feel are causing you the most upset in your life, because they're the ones who force you to face yourself. And it isn't what you face that controls your life. What you face in life, you just move on and deal with it, and you're in charge of it. It's what you don't face that controls your life. The overweight person who just simply ignores and won't face my compulsive eating. The alcoholic who won't face the fact that I'm drinking too much and I'm in control. The people in a relationship who won't face the trauma between them. You see, if you can't say no within a relationship, you'll have to say no to the relationship eventually. By saying no within the relationship, any relationship, what I mean is that you have to let other people know, including the people that love you the most, your parents, your children, your husband, your wife, your affiliates, your business people, your friends. You have to let them know that you have to be your own person. And that when they want you to be something that you can't be because it conflicts with where you are on the path, and your own path of enlightenment, of fulfillment, of no-limit living, that you have to say no to that. And that will strengthen the relationship. You will let somebody know these are the limits. No, I can't be that. I can't be your little victim. I can't just be your little servant. No, I can't be the kind of person that you can tell me when I have to be here or what I have to think or what time I have to be there. No, in other words, you're saying no, the N word, okay? It's a big word to be able to say. And you can do that with love and dignity and respect, but firmness, but mean it, all right, with commitment. Not with your opinion is controlling me, but with this commitment that, no, I have to say no to these things that you want of me because I can't be what you think I should be. Then you'll never have to say no to the relationship because it will flourish and grow. It's only what you don't face. It's only the things that you just continue to ignore and you hope will go away that are really controlling your life in a negative way. So it's just like you reverse all of that. You begin to stand up to the people that you love the most and also the people that don't even know you, the strangers. The same thing applies in just a simple little exchange of a bank teller or a sales clerk or whatever. If you can say no within that relationship, no, I won't be treated this way, but I think you're terrific, you're having a great, but I won't be talked to this way, or I'm going to get my refund, or whatever it is that you can say no within it, then you don't have to say no to the relationship. You don't have to just walk away in a huff and get mad and lose, but you have to be able to do it with an inner conviction, with the love that you are. Not with love, but with the love that you are. You have gotten yourself to the point that you understand that what's inside of you is a result of what you think. You have unclogged yourself of negativity and processing your world in those ways. So that when you encounter a situation in which people are having a different opinion than you, that what you do with that is you respond with what you have inside. And when you respond with what you have inside, it's firm, it's no, but it's always love. And then you don't have to blame anybody for anything that happens in your life.